The man in the mirror was a gaunt stranger, a collection of sharp angles and hollows where softness used to be. Mark's hands, trembling with a constant low-grade tremor, gripped the edge of the bathroom sink as he met his own reflection. His collarbones stood out like twin ridges under skin that was stretched too thin, and the wedding band on his finger spun loosely, a golden whisper around a bone. This was the work of the invisible storm inside him, a hyperactive thyroid that burned through his calories and his vitality with a relentless metabolic fire. Every day was a battle against a profound fatigue that made his limbs feel filled with lead, a stark contrast to the frantic internal energy that consumed him from within. He shuffled into the living room, the simple effort of crossing the threshold leaving him breathless. His two children, Lily and Noah, were a burst of vibrant life on the floor, surrounded by colorful building blocks. The moment they saw him, they abandoned their toys and rushed to his side, their small, warm bodies pressing against his thin legs. Lily, the eldest at 5, wrapped her arms around his waist with a fierce protectiveness, while 3-year-old Noah simply buried his face in his father's threadbare pajama pants. In their eyes, he was not a shadow. He was their anchor. Ella watched from the archway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her gaze wasn't one of concern, but of cold appraisal. A tight, mocking smile played on her lips. "Look at you," she said, her voice cutting through the children's quiet murmurs. "My skinny shadow. Do you even cast one anymore? Or does the light just pass right through you?" She let out a short, humorless laugh, her eyes sweeping over his diminished frame with open embarrassment. The children clung tighter, their small hands fisting the fabric of his clothes, sensing the cruelty in their mother's tone. This was the new rhythm of their 7-year marriage, a symphony of tension scored by his illness. The intimacy that had once been a warm, shared space had vanished, replaced by Ella's palpable aversion. She slept, turned away from him on the far edge of their king-sized bed, the expanse of mattress between them a cold, unspoken chasm. Her touches, when they happened at all, were quick and clinical, devoid of the warmth that had once been their foundation. She seemed to shrink from the very evidence of his body's betrayal, as if his condition were a contagious failure. Yet, in the heart of this domestic chill, his children were a constant, radiant sun. Noah would pat his father's sunken cheek with a chubby hand, his brow furrowed in a toddler's version of deep concern. Lily would carefully bring him a blanket, tucking it around his shoulders with a solemnity beyond her years. Their love was an unwavering, unconditional force, a stark contrast to the conditional affection their mother now offered. They saw past the protruding bones and the trembling hands. They saw only their father, the man who told them stories and whose lap was still their favorite place in the world. As Mark sank into his worn armchair, the children immediately clambered up, their combined weight a comforting, solid pressure on his frail legs, a living bouquet, breathing shield against the sharp words and the colder realities of his fading health. The invisible storm inside Mark did more than just ravage his body. It began to systematically dismantle the life he had built. The medical bills arrived first, crisp, white envelopes that felt like lead weights in his hands. They piled up on the kitchen counter, a paper monument to his failing health, each one detailing scans, blood panels, and specialist consultations that their insurance only partially covered. The numbers were staggering, a cascade of digits that bled their once healthy savings account dry. The financial security they had worked 7 years to accumulate evaporated in a matter of months, siphoned away by the relentless demands of his treatment. Then came the final, crushing blow. A formal letter from the architectural firm, where he had been a rising star, cited his prolonged absence and inability to perform his duties. His job, the cornerstone of their comfortable life, was gone. The severance package was a paltry sum that disappeared into the chasm of their medical debt within weeks. The foreclosure notices followed, their stark, official language a death knell for the home they had chosen together, the home where Lily had taken her first steps and Noah had spoken his first word. They were forced into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment where the walls were thin and the air smelled faintly of mildew, a constant, humiliating reminder of their precipitous fall. Ella's resentment, once a cold undercurrent, now boiled over into a corrosive rage. She no longer mocked his appearance. She blamed him for their ruin. Her eyes, when they landed on him, were flinty with accusation. She saw the stack of unpaid bills, the eviction notice, the empty spaces where their furniture no longer fit, and she saw only him, the source of it all. The man she had married for his ambition and stability was now a gaunt, trembling liability. Her presence in the apartment became fleeting. She started sneaking out after dark, the soft click of the front door, a sound that made Mark's heart clench. She offered no explanations, returning in the early hours with the scent of cheap perfume and night air clinging to her clothes, her neglect of the children, a new, painful constant. Left alone in the dim apartment, Mark battled a twin siege of physical weakness and suffocating guilt. Every tremor in his hands felt like an accusation, every dizzy spell a personal failure. He watched his children, confused by their mother's absences and the unfamiliar, shabby surroundings. And a shame so profound, it was a physical ache settled deep in his bones. He was the provider, the protector, and he had failed them utterly. Yet, that very failure forged a new, desperate strength in him. While Ella was gone, he would rally what little energy he had, heating canned soup on the stovetop, his hands shaking as he ladled it into bowls. He would read them stories in a voice he was forced to be steady, creating a fortress of routine and normalcy within those thin walls, trying to shield their innocent hearts from the adult turmoil crashing all around them. He became a ghost of a father, pale and thin, but his love for them was the one thing his illness could not consume. The scent of a stranger's cologne became the ghost in their home, a faint, musky trail that lingered on Ella's coat long after she had hung it in the closet. Her excuses for absence had evolved from vague errands to a rigid schedule of late nights at work, a narrative she delivered with a rehearsed flatness that did not invite questions. Mark, anchored to the worn sofa by his debilitating fatigue, would watch her prepare for these evenings with a cold, meticulous focus. She applied her makeup with a precision he hadn't seen in years, choosing dresses that hugged a form she no longer shared with him, her movements sharp with a purpose that had nothing to do with their family. He was a prisoner in his own deteriorating body, a spectator to the slow unraveling of his marriage. The suspicion, a cold, heavy stone, had settled in his gut. It was in the way her phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now a guarded secret, clutched in her hand even as she moved from room to room. It was in the new, unfamiliar lilt in her voice. During hushed conversations, she ended abruptly when he entered. And it was in her eyes, which no longer held even the heat of her anger for him, but a distant, calculating gleam, as if he were a problem she was already in the process of solving. The true confirmation of her betrayal, however, did not come from her clandestine phone calls or her lingering perfumes. It came in the dead of night, from the small, shared room down the hall. The children's cries for their mother were soft, plaintive sounds that cut through the silence more effectively than any shout. Lily would whimper, a quiet, heartbreaking sound while Noah's calls were more direct, a confused, "Mama, Mama, where are you?" Mark would lie in the oppressive darkness of his own room, listening, his own heart cracking with every sob. He knew where she was. She was not working. She was not thinking of them. She was in some other man's arms, in some other bed, while his children cried for a comfort he felt too broken to fully provide. Despair was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest, making each labored breath a struggle. The image of her with another man, laughing at his weakness, flaunting a vitality he could no longer offer, played in a torturous loop behind his eyes. He envisioned her being held, desired, cherished in ways he was too sick to manage, and the humiliation burned like a fever. A healthier man would have raged. A stronger man would have confronted her, demanded the truth, and shattered the fragile, poisonous peace of their home. But Mark was neither healthy nor strong. He was a collection of brittle bones and a faltering heart, tethered to this life only by the two small souls in the next room. To confront Ella was to risk the final, cataclysmic explosion, and he was too weak to weather the fallout, too afraid of what would be left for his children in the rubble. So he remained silent, a sentinel of sorrow in the dark, absorbing the sounds of his children's grief and the silent accusations of his own powerlessness, his isolation deepening into an abyss from which he saw no escape. The silence that greeted Mark when he finally managed to push open the apartment door was more unnerving than the children's usual cries. It was a thick, waiting silence, heavy with an absence that felt wrong. The day had been a marathon of weakness, each hour a struggle against the trembling in his hands and the leaden fatigue in his legs. He had spent it slumped in a hard plastic chair at the free clinic, waiting for a refill of medications he could barely afford, the fluorescent lights humming a dull hymn to his despair. All he had wanted was to come home to the small, warm chaos of his children, to lose himself in the simple, anchoring ritual of their needs. But the apartment was dark, the only light a pale, sickly gray from the window overlooking the alley. He dropped his keys on the small table by the door, the clatter unnaturally loud in the stillness. Then he heard it, a soft, hiccuping sob from the direction of the children's room. His heart, already a fragile thing, gave a painful lurch. He moved as quickly as his unsteady legs would allow, finding Lily and Noah huddled together on the floor. Noah's face was streaked with dried tears, his small body shuddering with quiet, exhausted cries. Lily held him, her small arms wrapped around her brother, her own eyes wide and glassy with a fear that was far too old for her 5 years. "She didn't come home," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "We're hungry." The words were a physical blow. Ella's neglect had been a slow, creeping poison. But this outright abandonment, was a new and terrifying depth. A cold dread began to uncoil in Mark's stomach, cutting through the ever-present fog of his illness. He forced his trembling hands to still as he gathered them both, their small, warm bodies clinging to him as he carried them to the kitchen. He found crackers and apple slices, a meager offering that they devoured with a frantic urgency that twisted his gut. As they ate, his eyes scanned the small apartment, searching for any sign of Ella, any note, any explanation. There was nothing. Her purse was gone. Her favorite jacket was missing from its hook. The dread solidified into a sharp, piercing anxiety. He moved through the rooms, his breathing becoming shallow. The living room was empty, the bathroom dark. He checked her side of the closet. A few empty hangers swung loosely, but most of her clothes remained. This was not a permanent departure then. It was something else. He was about to turn back to the children when a sound, faint but unmistakable, froze him in his tracks. It came from behind the closed door of their bedroom. Their matrimonial bedroom. The room that had become a monument to his failure and her coldness. It was a low, rhythmic thumping, followed by a muffled, guttural laugh that was decidedly not Ella's. A cold sweat broke out on his brow. The children, sensing the shift in him, had crept from the kitchen and now stood a few feet away, their small faces pale and confused. Lily's hand found Noah's, their fingers intertwining. Mark's own heart was a frantic, wild drum against his ribs, a painful, syncopated rhythm that threatened to shake his frail body apart. He took a slow, unsteady step toward the door, each movement an agony of suspense. The noises from within grew slightly clearer, a shifting of weight, the creak of the bed springs that had been silent for so long, another deep, male chuckle. The children trailed silently behind him, their wide, fearful eyes fixed on the door, sensing the wrongness, the violation of this space that was supposed to be their parents' sanctuary. A sanctuary that had long been cold, but was now terrifyingly occupied. The doorknob felt like a block of ice in Mark's sweating palm. Every instinct screamed at him to turn away, to shield the children, to preserve the last shred of his dignity, but a force greater than his weakness propelled him forward. He pushed the door open, the wood groaning on its hinges, and the scene that unfolded before him was a tableau of such profound humiliation that for a moment, the very air left his lungs. There, in the center of the bed, he and Ella had once shared, a tangle of limbs and rumpled sheets moved in a rhythm of raw, careless passion. Ella was pinned between two men, her head thrown back. A strand of her hair stuck to her glistening forehead. Her eyes, when they flickered toward the door, held no surprise, no shame, only a flash of cold, irritated annoyance. The two men, their backs slick with sweat, paused their movements, their faces turning toward the intrusion with expressions of lazy curiosity, as if Mark were a delivery man who had arrived at an inconvenient time. The air in the room was thick and stale, heavy with the scent of sweat, cheap whiskey, and a perfume that was not the one he had bought her for their anniversary. Time seemed to fracture, each second stretching into an eternity of agony. Mark's gaze was locked on Ella, on the familiar curve of her shoulder, now under a stranger's hand, on the wedding band that still glinted mockingly on her finger. His own body, so thin and brittle, felt like it might simply disintegrate under the weight of the betrayal. This was not just infidelity. This was a desecration, a deliberate, brutal act of annihilation performed in the one place that was supposed to be their private sanctuary. From the doorway came a small, terrified whimper. Lily and Noah stood frozen, their small hands clutching the doorframe, their faces crumpling in confusion and horror. They did not understand the specific acts, but they understood the chaos, the nakedness, the presence of strange men where their father should be. Their mother's distant, angry figure was one thing, but this was a monster from a nightmare, made real in their own home. Ella's voice cut through the thick silence, sharp and dismissive as broken glass. "Get out, Mark." There was no apology, no attempt to cover herself. Her words were a command, cold and final, meant not for a husband, but for a servant who had overstepped. "Take the brats with you. You're killing the mood." The words landed like physical blows, each one driving the reality of his worthlessness deeper into his soul. The shock that had held him paralyzed, shattered, replaced by a wave of heartbreak so profound, it was a physical pain, a tearing sensation deep within his chest. But beneath the pain, a new, fierce instinct ignited, the need to protect his children from this venomous scene. He would not let them be poisoned by her cruelty any longer. His hands, which had trembled for months with the weakness of his disease, were now steady as he turned his back on the grotesque spectacle in the bed. He did not look at the men, did not grant them the recognition of his anger or his pain. He knelt, his movements slow and deliberate, and gathered his weeping children into his arms. Lily buried her face in his neck, her small body shaking with sobs, while Noah clung to his shirt, his cries muffled against the fabric. Mark rose, holding them close, their combined weight a precious grounding burden. He walked from the room without a backward glance, pulling the door shut on the sounds of resumed laughter, a vow solidifying in his broken heart. He would gather what was left of them, he would retreat, and he would build a fortress of his own making, one where their innocence would be safe from the woman who had so carelessly shattered it. The aftershocks of the bedroom's desecration rippled through the cramped apartment, leaving a silence more profound than any noise. Mark sat on the worn sofa, a child tucked under each arm, their small bodies still trembling with the residual terror of what they had witnessed. He held them close, his own heart a raw, exposed nerve. But his hands were gentle as he stroked their hair, his voice a low, steady murmur weaving a fragile shield of comfort around them. The storm of his initial shock had passed, leaving behind a cold, clear resolve. He could not let this stand. The children's muffled sobs, the confusion in their wide, wet eyes, they were a demand for action that transcended his own weakness. He waited until their breathing evened out into the shallow rhythms of exhausted sleep before he carefully extricated himself. He covered them with a blanket, tucking the edges around their small forms with a tenderness that felt like his last remaining strength. Then he turned and walked toward the bedroom door, which stood slightly ajar, a sliver of dim light leaking into the hall. He pushed it open. The scene inside had shifted from chaotic passion to casual disregard. Ella was alone now, pulling a silk robe over her shoulders, her movements efficient and unburdened. The two men were gone, the only evidence of their presence, the rumpled sheets and the lingering musky scent in the air. She was packing a small suitcase, tossing in cosmetics and a few pieces of jewelry with an air of finality. She did not look up as he entered. Mark's voice, when it came, was raspy but clear, stripped of the tremor that usually haunted it. He spoke of their vows, of the family they had built, of the profound violation that had just occurred in the one space that should have been sacred. He did not shout. He did not plead. He simply laid out the wreckage of their marriage before her, a final, quiet inventory of her betrayal. Ella finally turned, zipping the suitcase with a sharp, definitive sound. Her laugh was a short, ugly thing. "Look at you," she sneered, her eyes raking over his gaunt frame, his pale, desperate face. "You think you have the right to make demands? You're a ghost, Mark, a walking skeleton. You couldn't be a husband. You couldn't provide. You can't even stand up straight without shaking. You think I was going to waste my life playing nurse to a dying man?" She picked up her suitcase, her expression one of pure, unadulterated contempt. "You're weak, and weakness is a choice. I'm choosing to live." With that, she brushed past him, her shoulder knocking against his, a final, dismissive impact. The front door opened and then clicked shut, the sound echoing through the apartment like a gunshot. She was gone. The silence she left behind was different now, not heavy with dread, but hollowed out, empty. Mark stood in the doorway of the defiled bedroom, her words echoing in the cavern of his mind. Weakness is a choice. For the first time, he did not feel the crushing weight of their truth. Instead, he felt a spark. He looked back at the sofa, at his sleeping children, their faces peaceful in slumber, trusting him even in their dreams. Their love was not a choice. It was a fact, as solid and real as the floor beneath his feet. That love became a fuel, igniting a fire in a part of him he thought had long since turned to ash. He would not be weak for them. He would not fade away and leave them orphans to the world. The next morning, with a clarity of purpose that cut through the ever-present fatigue, he made a phone call. He found a low-income clinic, swallowed his pride, and explained his situation. He started the rigorous, demanding treatment for his hyperthyroidism, enduring the side effects and the strict regimen not for himself, but for the two small hearts that depended on him. He reached out to old colleagues, his voice still thin but steady, seeking any kind of drafting work he could do from home. He scrubbed the apartment from top to bottom, airing out the bedroom until not a trace of the betrayal remained, reclaiming the space not as a matrimonial bed, but as a place of rest and safety. He built a new routine of meals, of stories, of walks to the park, a fortress of stability constructed brick by brick with his own two, slowly steadying hands. While Ella's name became a whisper, linked to a trail of reckless encounters and fading glamour, Mark was rebuilding. He was planting his feet firmly on the ground, his gaze fixed not on the wreckage behind him, but on the future he would build for his children, a future founded on health, on resilience, and on a love that would never, ever leave. The years had a way of sanding down sharp edges, of softening the harsh lines of past trauma with the gentle persistence of new routines and quiet joys. The man who stood at the kitchen window of their modest, sunlit house was a testament to that transformation. Mark's reflection in the glass showed shoulders that were no longer sharp angles, but solid planes, and a face that had filled out, the hollows beneath his cheeks now smooth with healthy weight. The tremor in his hands was a distant memory, banished by the strict discipline of his treatment and the steady passage of time. He watched as Lily, now a vibrant teenager with her mother's hair, but her father's kind eyes, helped her younger brother Noah with his science project at the garden table. Their laughter, easy and unforced, was the music that filled this home, a home built not on wealth, but on unwavering love and hard-won stability. He had clawed his way back from the brink, one draft at a time, one healthy meal at a time, one bedtime story at a time. The small architectural firm he ran from his home office was thriving, a quiet success built on reliability and a reputation for meticulous work. The financial fears that had once haunted their every moment were ghosts he had successfully exorcised. More importantly, his children were thriving. They were secure, loved, and carried the scars of their early childhood not as open wounds, but as a quiet understanding of their father's strength. Their home was a sanctuary of board games, shared meals, and the comfortable clutter of a life well lived. Mark's victory was not one of vengeance or wealth, but of profound, peaceful contentment. He had become the anchor he had always promised to be, his roots now deep and unshakable. While Mark's world had solidified into something strong and beautiful, Ella's had continued its dizzying, chaotic spiral. The reckless freedom she had chosen had become a gilded cage. The string of nameless, faceless men that had once represented her escape had become a blur of regret. The glamour had faded, leaving behind the stale scent of nightclubs and the hollow ache of transient connections. Her body, once her primary weapon and source of pride, had begun to betray her in a way far more insidious than Mark's ever had. It started with a persistent fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure, then a series of infections that her doctor treated with growing concern. The diagnosis, when it came, was delivered in the sterile, impersonal environment of a public health clinic. HIV, progressing into AIDS. The words were a death sentence, but more than that, they were a sentence of absolute isolation. The phone calls she had once relied on for companionship and validation went unanswered. The men who had shared her bed vanished like smoke. The vibrant social life she had prized evaporated, leaving her utterly alone in a small, drab apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of her choices. The reflection that stared back from her mirror was not that of a liberated woman, but of a gaunt, frightened stranger, her eyes shadowed with a terror far deeper than any Mark had known. The illness that ravaged her was not a random, cruel twist of fate, like hyperthyroidism. It was a direct, karmic consequence, a lesson written in the failing cells of her own body. One quiet evening, as Mark sat on the porch watching fireflies dance over his lawn, a deep, unshakable peace settled over him. He thought of Ella not with anger, but with a distant, profound pity. He had built a legacy of love. She had reaped a harvest of solitude. His children's laughter from inside the house was the final, gentle seal on his victory. It was a victory of spirit, of resilience, of choosing love over despair. Across the city, Ella lay in a hospital bed, the rhythmic beeping of the monitors the only company she had. The walls of her isolation were absolute. In the suffocating silence, her mind replayed the reel of her life, the cold dismissal in her own bedroom, the contemptuous words she had spat at a sick and broken man, the countless times she had chosen a stranger's fleeting touch over her children's outstretched arms. The weight of her actions, once shrugged off with arrogant ease, now crushed her with the force of a physical blow. There were no excuses left, no one left to blame. The universe, in its slow, inexorable way, had balanced the scales. In the cold, clinical dark, Ella finally learned karma's hard, unforgiving lesson. If this story touched you or you learned something from the story, please like and subscribe to our channel. We are posting this kind of videos here. Thank you, and see you in the next video.